She was quite forthcoming.
James Foster, a novelist, and his wife Em decided to spend some time at a resort in Litolka, a serene seaside country. One morning, they woke up to a beautiful view outside their hotel room. After admiring the scenery, they headed down for breakfast. At the restaurant, the hotel manager and his team were dressed in strange masks, as it was the day of a local festival. The manager greeted the guests, urging them to enjoy the celebration. After breakfast, Em expressed her desire to go out for dinner later, but James was hesitant. Em, thinking about the short time they had left before returning home in 3 days, decided to go for a walk on the beach. Later, James joined Em on the beach, where he saw a man causing a scene and the crowd was just watching. Suddenly, a girl walked up to James, angrily yelling at the man. She introduced herself as Gabby and seemed to recognize James immediately. She revealed that she was a huge fan of his first novel, even though James thought it had not done well. Gabby's words made him feel good about his work. She introduced her husband, Albin, who was an interior designer. The two couples decided to have dinner together at a local restaurant. While eating, they talked about their professions. Gabby was an actress in commercial ads, while Em owned a successful publishing company. Gabby impressed James with her acting skills, and he couldn't help but feel amazed by her talent. The conversation then shifted to James's next novel. He told Gabby that he was hoping to find inspiration for his next book during his stay. After dinner, James and Gabby danced together, and the experience left James with an unsettling feeling. The following morning, as James and Em were talking outside the hotel, Em expressed concern about the country's high crime rate and warned him not to trust strangers. James reassured her, mentioning that they had dined with Gabby and Albin the previous night, and they seemed like good people. Despite her concerns, Em agreed to go out with the couple that day. The four of them set off in a car and headed to the beach. As they arrived, James found himself staring at Gabby again. While Albin was cooking, James excused himself to use the bathroom. But, unexpectedly, Gabby grabbed him and initiated a sexual encounter, which left James feeling conflicted. Afterward, they spent the day enjoying the sun and cooking, then headed back to the resort. Later that evening, James, slightly drunk, found himself driving the car. As he was distracted by the flickering lights, he accidentally hit a local man. The group quickly got out of the car and checked the man, only to discover he was dead. The situation was bizarre, and James immediately wanted to report the incident to the police. Gabby, however, insisted that they couldn't call the police because of the country's corrupt system. She urged James to agree to stay quiet. Reluctantly, he agreed, and they returned to the resort. The next morning, there was a knock on James's door. He opened it to find the police standing there. Detective Thresh informed James that he was under arrest for the accident. In this country, the justice system was strange. The guilty person could have a clone created and killed in their place if they could afford it. James was horrified by the idea, but agreed to the punishment. He signed a paper, and money was exchanged. James was then led to a room filled with chemicals where he felt dizzy and hallucinated. In his dazed state, he saw himself with Gabby before waking up again in the police station. Em joined James, and they met Detective Thresh. The officer showed them James's clone, who looked exactly like him. When the clone opened its eyes, James felt an overwhelming sense of fear. Later, James watched as a young boy was brought forward to stab the clone repeatedly in the stomach, killing it in a brutal and disturbing manner. James was horrified by the sight, but strangely found himself captivated by the violence. Afterward, Detective Thresh handed James the ashes of his clone, and they returned to the resort. As they began to pack their bags to leave, James realized that his passport was missing, which upset Em. He explained that he couldn't leave without it. He suggested that Em return home to America, and he would follow in a few weeks. The next morning, James extended their stay for another week, but things took a strange turn. He met Gabby and Albin again, and Gabby seemed to know everything about the incident. She revealed that the country's justice system, where criminals had their clones killed, was well known among tourists like her group. Gabby explained that everything that had happened to James was part of a plan, one that had inspired his next book. Gabby introduced James to a small group of Western tourists, all of whom had committed serious crimes in the country. They had paid to watch their clones be killed in the same brutal way James had witnessed. These tourists, including Gabby and Albin, came back every year to commit new crimes and watch their doubles be slaughtered. James was taken aback, but remained calm as he listened to the group's plans for their next crime. Gabby led him to her room, where Albin offered him a drink. The rest of the group was there, and a man spoke about their next crime. They all seemed excited about their plans, and James felt a strange thrill at the idea of being part of it. As night fell, the group wore masks and left the resort. James, feeling nervous, joined them. They were about to carry out their next crime, and James couldn't shake the uneasy feeling building inside him. Yet, at the same time, he couldn't ignore the strange allure of what was happening, and a part of him wanted to see how far this dangerous game would go. James was just another tourist visiting a remote island, hoping to unwind. But things quickly took a dark turn. He met Gabby and her group of friends who seemed fun at first, but he soon learned they had a twisted habit of making cruel jokes at the expense of unsuspecting tourists. Gabby, in particular, took a liking to James, though her interest felt strange. She pushed him into a game where he had to act like a tourist on a dangerous mission. Before long, James was caught up in a world of violence, deception, and twisted entertainment. One night, they infiltrated a house belonging to a local leader, where they caught the man with his mistress. The situation quickly escalated, and the group began tormenting everyone inside. James, feeling out of his depth, hesitated when Gabby ordered him to kill the leader. He had never taken a life, and the thought made him uncomfortable. But before he could make a decision, the leader's guard attacked. Chaos broke out. Bullets flew, and in the chaos, one of the group, Albin, was injured. Gabby, on the other hand, was firing her weapon with cold precision. As the situation spiraled, an Indian dance performance was taking place at a nearby hotel, and the sound of music mixed with gunfire as all the guests returned to the hotel. The group ended up getting arrested, but in their drunken state, they acted like nothing had happened, claiming they were just having fun. Detective Thresh, however, was not so forgiving. He promised them that they had crossed a line this time and he wouldn't let them get away with it. Soon, other officers arrived, and the group found themselves tied up in the police station. It was a twisted turn of events as one by one their throats were slit. But the shock came when James realized that the people he thought were real were actually clones. The real group was somewhere else, watching everything unfold from a distance, laughing at James's confusion. The clones were sacrificed for their amusement, and James, now left with 2 jars of ashes, was left to ponder his next move. Days passed, and James was caught up in a haze of confusion and intoxication. Gabby, however, didn't let up. She introduced James to a local plant that, when smoked, put them both into a deep intoxication. This led to a night of passion, filled with wild, reckless behavior. The next morning, James was hungover and his behavior became erratic, even mistreating the resort staff. A man informed the group that James's new passport was ready, but Detective Thresh still stood in their way. Gabby and the others were ready to teach him a lesson. That night, the group made their way to the police station. While James waited outside, high and confused, the others went inside, bringing Detective Thresh back with them. They threw him into an ambulance. And outside, James's drunkenness reached new heights. He humiliated Detective Thresh in front of everyone, pouring alcohol over him, hitting him, and finally urinating on him. It was all part of the twisted game. But then, in an unexpected twist, Gabby pulled off Thresh's mask, revealing that the man he had been tormenting was a clone of James himself. The group began laughing as James felt a wave of shame wash over him. He ran back to his room, disoriented and unsure of what to make of the situation. He no longer wanted to be a part of this madness. As he sat in his room, he realized that the only way out was to leave. He grabbed his hidden passport, one he had kept for safety, and made a plan to escape the island. James sneaked out of the hotel in the dead of night and boarded a bus to the airport. But his attempt to escape was thwarted when Gabby and the group caught up with him. Gabby, angry and mocking, pulled a gun on the bus driver, forcing him to stop. She threatened everyone, then dragged James out and made it clear that she and the others enjoyed making fun of tourists like him every year. They saw him as nothing more than a pawn in their twisted game, and they relished in turning him into a part of their sick amusement. James tried to fight back, but in the struggle, he was shot in the leg. He fled into the nearby wilderness, bleeding and disoriented. After hours of wandering, he collapsed at a farm, where a kind local family took him in and helped him recover. His physical wounds healed, but the psychological scars were deep. Hallucinations and fever dreams filled his mind as he struggled to understand the nightmare he had been caught in. When James finally regained his strength, Gabby and her group returned. Gabby apologized, but it felt insincere. The group was still playing their game. Gabby offered James a twisted reward, exposing herself in front of him. It was a part of their sickening ritual. But this time, James had had enough. He refused to play along, and in a moment of clarity, he confronted his clone, who had been turned into a violent, drugged-up animal. James was given a knife to kill his clone, but instead he fought back, breaking the clone's jaw in a fit of rage. The madness was starting to break him, but Gabby didn't stop. She continued to twist his mind, hoping to turn him into one of them. A killer, a puppet for their amusement. Eventually, James found himself becoming part of the group. He had no choice but to play along. Days passed, and James began to change. He became numb to everything, focusing only on the jars of ashes he had collected, symbols of his descent into madness. Eventually, he spoke to M, a member of the group, telling her that he was planning to leave. But he couldn't go back to the world he once knew. The group was leaving the island, heading back to America, but James had other plans. At the airport, while everyone else chatted about their mundane lives, James felt like a shell of his former self. He had been broken. He decided not to board the flight. Instead, he stayed behind, alone at the now-closed resort, surrounded by the ghosts of the past few days. The monsoon season began, and as the rain poured down, James sat in silence, a man shattered by his experiences. And to not let your binge be shattered, I recommend you click on my recaps on the right. Drop a like and subscribe in case you don't want to miss awesome stories in the future. Grab your popcorn, enjoy yourself, and see you soon, my friend.